With a lot of dominoes falling in the quarterback carousel, we have a new topic of conversation. Russell Wilson and Carson Wentz find new teams, Rodgers stays, we have the draft coming up, but what about the players that are currently in the league that are more than likely going to find new teams this year, players that were starters at some point but eventually found themselves being backups in the NFL? Which of these guys should get a shot to lead a team in the 2022 NFL season? Well, today we're going to be covering those guys. We'll talk about Gardner Minshew, Mitchell Trubisky, Jameis Winston, and Marcus Mariota, which teams would be a good fit for them, and we'll talk about why or why not they should get another chance in the NFL this upcoming season. There's a lot to talk about because we're covering 4 people rather than 1, so let's not waste any more time and get right into it. And we're going to be kicking things off with Gardner Minshew because he is the most interesting one to me, because the other 3 guys have either been Heisman Trophy winners or they were selected within the first 2 picks, whereas Gardner Minshew was a 6th-round pick and got to start for a horrible Jackson Jaguars team, and then got the 1 start last year with the Eagles, but then was replaced the very next week by Jalen Hurts. So to talk about Gardner, he's in a very peculiar spot, and he is an enigma when it comes to NFL quarterbacks. And after watching his games, I feel really bad for him in the spot he's found himself, because he has a larger-than-life personality and a lot of good traits to go with it. He was 6-6 his rookie year and showed a lot of promise with a solid arm, but more importantly, he showed that he can protect the football and be efficient with a less than desirable situation around him. And this shows in his 22 games as he's been a starter and the additional 5 games that he's got some playing time. He's had 41 touchdowns to only 12 interceptions and a 65% completion rate, most of those being in Jacksonville with an inferior team. But he is an enigma because he finds himself in the category as not elite enough to compete with the top dogs in the NFL who are bona fide starters, but also the teams that don't have those elite guys that is likely going to take a young quarterback with a lot of potential that they can hopefully develop into a superstar that Gardner is currently better than. A prime example of this is what happened on the Eagles last year with Jalen Hurts. Gardner was slightly more experienced and is better taking care of the football. He probably would have been the better short-term solution for the Eagles in the 2021 season, but the Eagles wanted to develop Jalen Hurts because he is so dynamic and has so much potential with his legs and creating plays in the passing game. So we're not going to sit here and say that Gardner is going to go out and take quarterbacks' place like Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Russell Wilson, and maybe even go down as far as someone like Kirk Cousins. But who he reminds me of a lot in the NFL is Ryan Fitzpatrick, a very solid quarterback who would never start over a top 10 quarterback, but routinely wouldn't get a starting role for a rebuilding team who is developing a rookie quarterback. Gardner will more than likely be a guy like Fitzmagic who's going to be a duct tape for a team when their elite starter goes down, and their team won't take that much of a drop off. I'd go as far as say with a team like Indianapolis, he could go there and absolutely make the playoff with a team with all their talents. I think Minshew is a lot better than people are giving credit for, and that's why I feel really bad that this is where I think he's going to find himself in. But moving on to the next 2 people on this list that are in very similar situations to each other is Jameis Winston and Mitchell Trubisky, both top picks that showed a lot of promise but eventually got booted for inconsistent and reckless plays that weren't helping their team win, and they both became backups because of this. So starting with Jameis, he took the role as the understudy to Drew Brees and went on to learn from him and Sean Payton until he could take over the following year on a cheap contract after Drew Brees retired. And man, did this ever pay dividends. He waited patiently, swallowed his pride with his huge personality and being a Heisman Trophy winner and first overall pick to sit back and learn. And when it was his time, he was balling out, and still the occasional what the hell was he thinking throwing that type of balls, but he looked much more refined. He won the team over and won the quarterback battle and led the Saints to have a 5-2 record before coming down with his injury. And he had in that season 14 touchdowns to only 3 interceptions, which is so unlike Jameis Winston. And so he was on pace for 34 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and just shy of 3,000 yards. And Jameis showed that he learned to control his urge to make that game-breaking play when it wasn't called for and lean more on his teammates like Kamara to take a heavier load. I was so impressed with his improvements, and it was unfortunate that he came down with that injury because I would have loved to see how the season would have unfolded for him. With all that being said, I think Jameis's intangibles as a leader and a hard worker and his ability to lead an NFL franchise, I think a team could really count on him to take over and lead them to be serious contenders in the playoffs. He put in the work and he absolutely earned another chance to show what he can do in the NFL. So moving on the flip side of this is Mitchell Trubisky, who showed so much potential early on being a Pro Bowl quarterback and a double doink away from being a playoff winning quarterback, but then became heavily memed as a bust as he was directly compared to Mahomes and Deshaun Watson, who were both selected behind him in the same draft class. But now looking back, we have Justin Fields. We give him a lot of excuses with the Bears O-line and the horrific play calling of Matt Nagy that led him to be kicked out of Chicago. And so now can we look back and say that we were way too harsh on Trubisky? Well, yes and no, and we're still 1 year behind from what we saw from Jameis because Trubisky sat a whole year behind Josh Allen and Brian Daboll, and now we get to see what he learned. But I think it's slightly different because with Jameis had an arm arrogance that he thought he'd make every single throw, and it costed his team big time. However, Trubisky's problem in Chicago was a lot more concerning than this. He showed to not fully understand complex NFL defenses and was inaccurate on very simple throws. He did show that he could make a lot of tight window throws and had a lot of talent, but not enough to do it over and over where it would lead to touchdowns, and definitely not for 4 consecutive quarters and throughout an entire season. I think what he came out of college proved to be overfetched. He wasn't the scrambling gunslinger a lot of people thought he would be. So if it's me and you guys in the comments are playing GM for a second and we're in the market for a quarterback this upcoming season, is Trubisky worth giving the reins to your franchise and $10+ million to see if he made those improvements? Well, unfortunately for us in our fantasy GM land, we can't pick up the phone and call Buffalo and talk about his progression throughout the season, but I would be very skeptical to put my eggs in the Trubisky basket because his flaws and his ceiling are much more concerning than what I think Jameis Winston's were. Now we look back, we could be 100% wrong, but I'm going into the season saying that picking him up and giving him that kind of money when we could go in another direction would be a mistake. All right, let's move on to our fourth and final guy, Marcus Mariota. This one is tricky because out of all the guys on this list, it's been the longest since we've seen him be a full-time starter. And he also didn't back up for a premier franchise in the NFL right now like Drew Brees, Sean Payton, and Josh Allen, Brian Daboll, but he was behind Derek Carr, who's a very solid and I think very underrated quarterback, but he was in a mess of a city. Las Vegas was littered with controversy and drama. His head coach was John Gruden, who came out to be a real standout guy, but then he got Rick Bisaccia, an interim head coach who did very well for the organization, but wasn't an offensive developmental guru like the other guys on this list. He was also surrounded with so much drama with teammates I'm sure you're all aware of. We won't get into all of that, but what did we see from Mariota appearance was he was a third and short RPO read option type of quarterback. So what can we take from all of this? Well, his role in Las Vegas was a vast underreach of what he's actually capable of, and he's an electrifying runner and also impressed me with his arm more so than a lot of people initially give him credit for. By all accounts, he's a great teammate, and I love his humility accepting the role as an understudy, week in and week out, preparing like he's the starter and making the best of the opportunities that were given to him. And I'll actually take this portion of the video right now where I think they could go, starting with Mariota. I think a team like the Indianapolis Colts, who just got off the Carson Wentz roller coaster season, I would love to see Mariota be the starter in Indy for the 2022 season because what he does so well is he does what he's supposed to do, and the Colts have an offensive line that is incredible, MVP caliber running back and Jonathan Taylor to pair with in the backfield, and the Colts defense also played amazing throughout the season. Mariota would have so much weight off his shoulders, and he's able to make the throws that are necessary to keep the defense honest, but at the same time scare the shit out of them with his legs, because when you have to worry about Jonathan Taylor going one way, now you have to worry about Mariota going the other way if you're going to overcommit. I think he's deserving to be a starter once again, and he's not going to command a large contract. So even though that the Colts have $70+ million in cap space, they can go out and get him for cheap and go out and get more weapons around him on offense and defense to be a really scary team in the AFC South. So moving on, I think Jameis could be a guy for a lot of teams, and I'm the most confident of him out of anyone on this list. And every team right now looking for a quarterback should be looking for Jameis if they're not going to pick one up in the draft. And now moving on to Minshew, I think he should go to a contending team, and God forbid their elite starter comes down with an injury. The team can still ride out the season with him, probably at like an 85% effectiveness rate till the starter returns, or if the starter is on a season-ending injury, can still go out and win playoff games with a contending team. As for Trubiski, I have way too many red flags to put him out as a starter, and his role on the Bills was very fitting, but I would not go out and give him a bigger contract that a lot of people are talking about right now. Well, that's what I think, and obviously this is all opinion based, and I'm always down to have conversation with you guys in the comments. People that bring in good, well thought out points, I always appreciate. Whether you agree or disagree, so be it. I'm always open to having my mind changed, and also willing to have a productive discussion with you guys if I still agree with my original take. So make sure to like this video if you like videos like these. Make sure to comment down below what you think, and make sure to subscribe if you enjoy daily sports content. You guys are the best. Thank you guys so much for checking out the channel, and as always, I will see you all tomorrow. Peace.